Hello everyone, welcome to IGA Simplified. I am Ketan and this is a part 2 of understanding and writing transforms in SailPoint Identity Security Cloud. So in the previous part, we have discussed about how to create a transform with the type concat, and we also discussed about how to build the transform. In this part, I wanted to cover the first valid type of transform, and we will also try to go through any example requirement, and I will also show you like how to create the first valid type of transform to achieve the expected value. Let's get started. So firstly, we will go to SailPoint documentation of first valid transform, and we will try to understand what are the different attributes that we need to use inside the transform and what is the syntax. And then we will go to a use case. So this is the first valid transform documentation provided by SailPoint ISC. So this is a public page and all the users can go and check the documentation. And I highly recommend that before working on any of these transforms, please go through the documentation first. So it will be very useful for you to understand like how to use the transform and where to use the transform, and it will be easier for you to create the transform because like they have already given a base like a sample snippets, so based on this like you can create the transform. So in the overview they have mentioned that use the first valid transform to perform if then else operations on multiple different data points to return the first piece of data that is not null. So if we want to the uh, fetch the first not null value from a list of data points, then we can use this first valid transform. So this first valid transform is also kind of similar to if then else statements, how we use if else if and else statements in C programming, or like even in Python, like we use if else statements. So this first valid transforms also kind of similar to this if else statements. And so when you have a list of data points and you want to fetch the data from the first not null value, so we can use first valid transform in this case. And also they have mentioned that this is often useful for SailPoint username attribute in which each identity requires a value, but the desired information is not available yet in Active Directory username. So in this case, you can use a first valid transform to populate the UID attribute with the user's linked Active Directory account information if the UID attribute is not null. So for example, in a scenario we are using an authoritative source, and in the source like we have the employee ID account attribute, and we want to populate the UID SailPoint username at identity attribute with account name employee ID attribute from the authoritative source HR source, just as an example in this case. So for few users, what they are saying is if the account attribute employee ID is null uh, for the user, then we will need another data point from where it will be ISC will be able to fetch the details and populate the value, because this SailPoint username, the technical name UID, so this is a mandatory attribute to create an identity. So definitely we need to pass some value, like we need to get populate this attribute identity attribute with some value in order to create the identity itself. So so what they are saying is if the attribute is not present in one source at one data point, you can go and check for an alternative some other place where you will be able to find the details. So yeah, we will discuss in detail about how we can do and how we can achieve it. So also like if we look at the transform structure, the first valid transform requires an array of list of values that you must consider. So as this is also as same as concatenation transform in a way that like even both concatenation transform and first valid transform both are expecting a array list of values. Okay, so these can be static strings or other nested transforms uh, which return values. Okay, and the main thing like one thing which when we are creating the transform we need to remember, we need to understand that transform returns the first entry in the array that evaluates to a not null value, non-null value. So you are recommended to provide the entries in an array in descending order of preference. So usually like in our case, so for example, let's take an example like we have an HR source and we have an active directory and we have an identity attribute first name which needs to be populated. So here we have a preference that first we need to fetch the value from first name from HR source. The HR source is the authoritative source or some other source. So HR source is the source and first name is the account attribute inside that HR source. So first we need to populate the first name identity attribute. First we need to fetch the value from first name uh, and we need to populate the first name identity attribute. If only the first name attribute is null or does not exist, then the second preference should be given to the given name from active directory source. And if this value is also does not exist or like not there, then we can give some like a static value no name. So here what we are doing is like we have a preference that first we need to get it from HR source. So this value should be there in the first value. This should be the first value that we are passing in the array. And the second preference is given to active directory given name. So this value should be the second value which we are passing in the array list. And at the end like we are going to pass a static value so that there even if these two are null and does not exist like we will be passing some value not to like not to get any error in the when the sale point evaluates the transform like so that like it will not result in an error, like we will just put a static value at the end, some string values. Okay, so that is what they are mentioned. So here like their first preference is like get the SAM account name from active directory. If and only if the SAM account name is null or does not exist, we are going to fetch the value login from Okta. If this value is also not present or like does not exist or null, then we are going to get the value from employee ID from HR source. Employee ID is the attribute name. So this is the preference that they have given. If we, if SailPoint was able to find the value inside the attribute SAM account name from Active Directory, so whatever the value in this SAM account name, SailPoint will return. It will not go and fetch the other values. So that is what when they have mentioned, like it will the transform returns the first entry in the array that evaluates to a non-null value. So if this value is non-null, then SailPoint will return, this transform will return the SAM account value from the active directory. If this value is null, then only SailPoint will try to go and fetch the login attribute from Okta. So that's why the when you are providing the entries in the array, it is very important like you go with whichever most preferred value. So based on the preference, you need to go. And we have top level properties, that is type, name, and required periodic refresh. So type will be first valid and name. You need to give a name so that when you are trying to map this transform with the identity attribute in the identity profile, in the drop down you'll be able to see that particular name and requires periodic refresh. So this is a boolean value and this is an optional value. Then coming to attributes, so we have one required attribute and one optional attribute. So values is the attribute which is required and it is expecting, it is a data type of array. So it is expecting a list of values. And we have one more optional attribute, ignore errors. Let's see an example of how we will be using the first valid transform. So we will take a use case, like a very sample use case, like which will be used almost in all the projects. So the use case or the requirement will be something like this. So we'll be having an identity attribute, uh, first name, and sometimes what the requirement will be like. So if the user has a preferred name populated from the authoritative source, like it will be one of the attribute in authoritative source. So like if preferred name value is already present, then they want to use the preferred name for to populate the first name identity attribute. So don't get confused here. So for example, we have authoritative source. We have an authoritative source, HR source, and in the HR source we have two account attributes. One is first name and the second one is preferred name. Okay, so so the client wants the first name identity attribute to be populated in a way that if the user's authoritative source account already have a preferred name populated, then we need to use preferred name for the first name identity attribute. If preferred name is not there, then only we need to use the first name. Okay, so this is like a almost like a common requirement from so many organizations. So this will be maybe like you will see this in one of the projects. So this is a very like a basic scenario. We can just create a simple first valid transform. It will not take much time. So first let's see what is the logic that we are going to use here. So the logic will be something like if uh, the attribute preferred name exists, come on, use preferred name to populate first name identity attribute. Else if the preferred name does not exist, the preferred name does not exist and the first name attribute exists. Use first name identity attribute, and in the else condition or like as a last scenario, what we will do is pass a static value no name. Okay, So this is how like we are going to build a transform. So in the transform, like first we will check if preferred name account attribute from HR source has a value, and we will try to populate that value with uh, the identity attribute first name. And if the preferred name does not exist, and then we will check for first name account attribute. If first name value exists, then we will use first name value to populate the identity attribute first name. If both of these attributes does not exist, then we will just pass a static value no name, so that we will not get any error. So expectation. The expectation will be something like, so preferred name is Tim, and first name is Timothy. So identity attribute uh, first name should be populated with Tim. Okay, so this is the expected values. Okay, let's go to VS Code, and in VS Code, like we will try to create the first valid transform. Okay, so it will be in JSON. So first we have this, like what is the type? The type is first valid, and as we discussed in the last part also, so I usually like create the transforms with the name like some client name, followed by the display name. So display name was the here, like we need to give the first name. So this is the identity attribute for which I am going to create this transform for. So first name is the identity attribute, and I will be using this transform to map it to the first name identity attribute and attributes. Okay. So in the attributes, we have this values. This is a mandatory attribute, and this values expect a list of values, like array list of values. So we'll be using a bar bracket. So here, what will be the first value? Like the first value will be preferred name from HR source, and the second value will be first name from HR source. The third name will be no name in a static string, no name. Okay. So let's get the first preferred name from HR source. So since preferred name is an account attribute which is present in the HR source, so what we will do is we will use an account attribute transform. Type account attribute transform, and in the account attribute transforms, so like attributes, what are all the different attributes that we need to use inside an account attribute transform is, the first one is source name. So from which source we need to fetch the details, so that is HR source, and in the HR source which attribute value that we are going to use, attribute name, that is, this is not the first name, this will be preferred name here, preferred name. So also, like if you remember, like we are not using a name here because this is a nested transform, and this is like a inside account identity. Sorry. Yeah. So here since we are using the account attribute transform inside first valid transform as a nested transform, so we don't need to use or give a name for this transform here. We don't need to specify a name. So yeah, so this block, it will, this is the first value that will be passing to the first valid transform, and this block of code will fetch the preferred name attribute value from the HR source. So this value will be fetched, like one more thing is to fetch this value, the user or the identity should have a correlated HR source account. Then ISC will go and get the account details of that identity, and in that accounts, like it will go and find the HR source account, and inside HR source account, so it will get the value of preferred name. So that is how it works. And if preferred name value is exist and present, if it is a not null, then the preferred name value will be returned back to the identity attribute, or this transform will return back the preferred name value. If preferred name is null, or the value does not exist, then it will try to then we need to tell ISC that what is the second option, like what is the next preferred option from where it can fetch the details. So this is also same account attribute, and what are all the attributes that we are going to use here is the source name. The source name is HR source, and what is the attribute name that we are going to use? So that is first name. So so if this value preferred name is a null value or any errors are there, then ISC will try to fetch the value from first name attribute from HR source. If this value is also null, then ISC will return a static value no name. So this no name static value, it can be given in two ways. Like this is one way, and if you want to just follow this order, then what you can do is take this value no name, and what we will do is we will create a small transform with type static attributes value. So the static transform, it expects a single value, so that is the reason why we are not going to pass an array of elements here. So we are just going to give a single value, unlike first valid, which accepts values in an array list. So this only accept a value in in a single value. So here, yeah, as discussed, what will happen. So first it will ISC will try to fetch the details of preferred name account attribute from HR source. If this value is there, like it is not null, then it will return back a preferred name. Otherwise, it will try to fetch the first name. If first name is there, then it will return back first name. If this value is also not null, then ISC will this transform, it will return this static value. And this first valid transform also has one more optional attribute. So let's go back to the first valid documentation. So here, if you look here, the attributes, here it says ignore errors. So it is of a Boolean type, and it is an optional attribute. So let's see what they mention about this transform. Sorry, this attribute. Whether to proceed to the next option if an error occurs, default is false. So what will happen is when ISC is evaluating this transform, like it is trying to fetch the values, if for example in this block, like if this block there is an error when it is trying to fetch the transforms, then ISC will stop the transform evaluation, and then like it will immediately like return back an error message. But if you want, if you are expecting errors for few of the values, and if you want a SailPoint to continue like going to the fetching the next value for and checking for the not null, then what you can do is like here you can just mention ignore errors. This is the name of the attribute. Sorry, needs to be outside of this. So the ignore errors needs to be mentioned inside the attribute, and the value should be true. So please understand that this ignore errors is an attribute inside the attributes of first valid. So this is this ignore error is one of the attribute, and it needs to be mentioned inside the attribute. It should not be mentioned outside this attribute. And this ignore error is expecting a boolean value. So that is the reason why like we should give a boolean value true or false. We should not keep this inside a double quotes. So if we give something like this is wrong. So this is a boolean value, and this is a string value. So this ignore errors always accepts the boolean value. So even if you want to give true or false value, you need to set this to a boolean true or boolean false. So if we don't give or if we don't pass any value, by default, like a SailPoint will set this ignore errors to false, so that if SailPoint encounters any errors when like evaluating or like when processing any of these blocks, then immediately it will return back an error. But if we set this value to true, then even like when SailPoint is trying to fetch this value and an error occurred, still SailPoint will fall back to the next option, this option. Like it will not stop the transform execution itself. Okay, so this is the use of this ignore errors attribute. So these are the things which I wanted to cover in this video. Hope you liked it. So if you have any suggestions for me, or like if you want me to explain any particular use case, or if you want me to explain any other transform, please let me know in the comments. And let's in the for the next video, like I'm thinking about explaining the display name, and I will also try to cover the conditional transform as well. So I will try to cover both conditional and display name transforms. And if you have any suggestions, like if you want me to explain any other transform, so please let me know. I will be happy to cover that as well. Thank you everyone. Have a good day.